No talking.
I like Paul.
Right on set.
Oh, that was worth waiting for, that.
Good afternoon and good morning and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the EV Cafe. For those of you that are new to the cafe, I would like to tell you what's in our coffee. So primarily, we are, as the EV Cafe crew and our members, are here to educate people on zero emission transport by sharing knowledge, exploring the next generation of innovation, and learn from case studies and insights from industry leaders. Most importantly, no death from PowerPoint. But it's up to you to make the most of these guest panelists. So ask us questions throughout the session. It is also a place where our members can network here in the cafe or at our LinkedIn page. It's a place for like minds to come and do business together and crucially transition us away from fossil fuels. Word makes me sick. Last month, we held our first live physical event at the ITT Hub in Farnborough, in which you members came to watch us in person, which was fantastic. It was an amazing show with over 30 special guests over the 2 days, and we really appreciate your time in coming to see us. And don't worry, there will be plenty more live events in the future. There's plenty more where that came from. So whatever we do, we always ensure there is a double espresso of banter and nonsense thrown into our coffee. The crew never let you down on this, trust me. Which is why I'm proud to announce a new section for today's show only, EV Cafe Masterminds, where we will be challenged and probably fail in answering some of your hardest questions. Hence the loud shirt, it's game show vibes for me. The hardest question will actually win one of these lovely EV Cafe mugs. There are no rules other than it needs to be related to decarbonisation. And you have to email me privately with the answers. Otherwise, I'm going to be made of a fool on camera. No change there then. But luckily for Paul, because he actually edits our videos, so he'll be able to edit out any times that he makes, which there'll probably be only 2 minutes of footage left.
Yeah, all 3 questions that I answer correctly.
And JC, John Curtis, will be our mastermind host. So that will be over to him and his word will be final. So I, Johnny Berry, will be joined by 3 other game show contestants and then 2 other game show contestants, which will be Neil and Lorna. And so the 3 game show contestants from the EV Cafe crew, otherwise known as the Evengers, they are Sarah Sloman, Head of Future Mobility Partnerships at Elmtronics, Paul Kirby, the founder of EV Essentials, and last but by no means least, Sam Clark, the Chief Electrification Vehicle Officer from GridServe. Did I get that wrong?
Yeah, you got it wrong.
But... 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Honestly.
I didn't do that on purpose, by the way, Sam. So.
You're so going to pay for that, I'm telling you.
and you already know who I am. I am Johnny Berry, recently appointed as Head of Decarbonisation for Hitachi Capital Vehicle Solutions. So what is on the menu today? Before we get to the mastermind special of the show, we will hear from our friends and patrons of the cafe. First up, we will get a decarbonisation update from Neil Durno, followed by the wonderful Lorna McAteer, who will give us a bit of a myth-busting session. Exciting, we all love a bit of myth-busting. Finally, it'll be time for a geek out as we listen to the infamous Dr. Ewan McTurk. And if you haven't seen him before, then make sure you have a coffee to hand and stay switched on. What he doesn't know isn't worth knowing.
And a dictionary.
Actually, most of what he knows I'll never understand anyways. And don't worry, we will of course open up the mailroom as and when we receive questions. Finally, the best part of the show towards the end will be the news round, brought to you by our very own anchor lady, Sarah Sloman. I look forward to that. Now, before we kick off the show, I just want to run over some digital housekeeping. First up, your involvement is important to us, so please use the Q&A tab to ask us questions and we'll endeavour to answer them during the mailroom sections of the show. If you want to come off mute and talk to us, then please do, and do this during the mailroom or the Speaker of the House sections. Paul will also invite you to come on off mute throughout the day, throughout the session. For anyone on camera, please just raise your hand as if you're at school if you want to talk, because we will have up to 9 people on the screen at any one time, so it just avoids crossing over each other. As far as the game show goes, John's word is final, however unfair that might actually be. And that's it. So just hopefully you've got a coffee, enjoy the show, and over to the Café crew. And JC, I'll start with you. We have some sponsors now. How important is that to us?
It's everything, to be really honest, because it allows us to get out and do the things that we do and message people and go and see people and communicate, actually get out and network. So massive thanks to My Energy, because frankly, you were first to step up and say, do you know what? We like what you're doing. My Energy, fabulous place to get charging infrastructure, systems for your home so that you can connect it all together and make fabulous use of renewable energy through to electric vehicles. And Kate Tyrrell has been an absolute legend working with us to help us get where we need to be, which is in your face. And she's good at that, frankly. Next up is Geotab. So we don't just have one sponsor now, we have 2, and we're massively proud of the work that we've managed to achieve with Geotab's support. They came along to the ITT Hub and were just brilliant. And if you want to see the video, it's on our LinkedIn page, and it's just awesome. Great interview. Thank you both so much, because without you, I'd lose the will to live and I couldn't put bread on the table. But I think even more impressive is those individuals who've sponsored us through Patreon. Now, we take a small amount of money each month, which goes into our coffers, helps us to continue to do this. We don't take a penny personally from providing the EV Cafe, but our Patreons, Roger Atkins, Elmtronics EV Charging, love a bit of Elmtronics, Anil Kumar Mehta from Smart Co-Wheels, Compared Leasing, Stuart Middleton, Neil Durno, and Lorna McAteer are all Patreons. And we are hugely grateful to them, because that's their personal money. It's not company money, it's personal money that they're putting in to the pot. And we really appreciate that. So to all of you, bless you. If you want to become a patron, we have a Patreon link. Kirby, why are you laughing?
Sam apparently pays for his own eyebrows. I mean,
I just saw that. I was like, what's that?
Why is it so eyebrowist today? I've been getting grief for mine as well.
Where did that random insult come from, Scott? I just saw it in the corner of my eyes. What's that?
You want to tell us all about it, Sam?
It's that personal manicured look that you go for, Sam. I think that must be what it is.
Well, we were at the ITT Hub last month. Do you want to tell the audience about that?
Yeah. So ITT Hub, come on. Where do we go, Paul?
Well, I mean, what a time that was, wasn't it? I mean, it was great to actually get out and see people. I mean, you know, we got, I felt like that we were probably some of the most privileged people, because we got to talk to so many great people. I mean, you know, there was so many people like the MD of Renault, Carlos Rodriguez. He really brought their electric vision to life, and just kind of meeting and hanging out with people. Wasn't that cool? Who else stood out for you guys?
Really good.
Sam's more worried about his eyebrows.
Well, I just can't believe quite how many people came. We had 4,000 people through the door, even with the difficult to manage COVID restrictions. So a huge shout out to the Farnborough International Centre, and also, of course, the ITT Hub team, who pulled it all together, kept everyone safe, and enabled those discussions to happen. And the best thing was, not only did it happen at the event, it happened before and after, and it's still going on now. I'm still processing all the people who I got to meet. So just goes to show how important live events are to our industry, and with our newly onboarded supportive partners in our sponsors that we have, we hope that's one of many that we'll be doing in 2021 and beyond. So grateful to Mark and the team.
Yeah, and somebody's mentioned that a real life astronaut, Darren Anvener, some real life astronaut, Kelly Davis, a great 2 days. And it was actually great to meet people that we've met online or through LinkedIn or different things like that, that've been on the EV Cafe, like Kelly. And Kelly's a fellow electric vehicle, commercial vehicle buff. And so we had a nice chat. So that was really cool.
The really freaky thing was walking into the hall at the ITT Hub and having people call my name that I've never met, that I don't know, who knew me. And that was really odd. And That doesn't happen a
Yeah,
great deal.
whatever, John, whatever.
Anyway, right, okay, sorry. No, but seriously, because I think what that does is it says, there are people who are happy to engage. They're happy to say, hello, it's me. And that's what we do. We're real people. We're not, superstar people who want £10,000 to fall out of bed. We're just regular guys and girls who do a job. We've got other lives, but you want to come and have a chat. And I was asked questions about charging, electric vehicles, and what do I drive and all that sort of stuff. And it was just wonderful to have people give a toss, and just want to spend a bit of time. Love you all.
They've been locked up for a long time.
Sam wants to talk.
Well, I try and get a word in today, right, if I can. But I was just going to say thank you, Paul. You're going to have to help me out here at the end of my sentence. But thank you also to the guys from Street Drone and the guys from EAV who brought vehicles with us, and our amazing converted VW electric Beetle as well. The name escapes me of the company. So Paul,
it was Joseph, and gosh, the name of the company. Something technology. Oh damn! I'll have to find it out now.
We'll put it in the link.
But but thank you to all those guys for putting the effort into bringing us vehicles to put on the stand as well. So it's as well as my energy, it's great to have some real product there and real people and real chat. And John wasn't the only one who got papped either, by the way, just with his head back in his box. But it was great. It was really it was so much fun to meet so many different people that we haven't met before, because it's all been on lockdown greetings and meetings through the EV Cafe. So it was amazing to meet real people. So thank you for coming.
But Sam, see, you're used to being papped. Yeah, to the rest of us, it's all new. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Whatever.
Right, it's time to hear. Well, it's time for our first guest speaker of today. So, welcome back to the EV Cafe, Neil. Thanks for being such a close friend and patron and supporter of us. And I'll leave it up to you.
Super. Okay, so I will do my bit and fire up the screen share.
What are you going to talk about, Neil?
Oh, I thought I might just mention a little something that happened last week.
What happened last week?
What happened last week? Blimey.
I don't know, but it better be good.
I hope it's good.
You can't find it.
I can find it. I'm just being asked to deny giving permission to something to actually open up. So that's where the rehearsal went wrong, isn't it?
This is where the pressure bubbles.
Scott's been quite clever. Is Lorna live from the lawn?
Good. Very good. Are you seeing me now?
No.
And John Lyons, we think it's going to be self-charging hybrids, actually.
Don't worry, Neil, you're eating into your presentation time.
That's all right. I mean,
he's got nothing to present. That's what it is.
I'm sure we'll get there. Yeah, I didn't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do my homework.
Lorna,
No, you got it the wrong way around. That's when I went to sleep.
we were talking about Lorna's lawn. Is that a bush behind you?
Steady.
Just asking. I like gardening. What's the problem?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
To the pure, all things are pure.
It's a holly bush, not a Lorna bush.
Yeah.
Pretty
Lorna, you might have to step in because at the moment I'm being completely denied sharing rights.
Oh, Johnny, have you?
I can't step and do your presentation. Just tell everybody what it was.
No,
just tell everyone.
Maybe we'll go to you, Lorna, and then we can come back to Neil later on.
Yeah.
Well, Neil, do you want to send it to one of us, and then I mean.
It's only 104 people watching, mate. Don't worry.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I don't mind. No pressure at all.
Surely you can just talk about it. Go on, wing it, Neil.
I failed in front of more than 104 people. It's not a problem.
Goodness, that must have been a hell of a party.
Right. So I'll send it over because I won't try and do it verbatim rather than slides. So, Lorna,
Right.
do you want to step forward?
I can do if you want.
Yeah, do that. It'd be far more professional for everybody, and then we can cut it out of the video.
Oh no, this is getting well.
No, yeah, there's never that. You don't get that privilege.
So the problem is, one of the bits I was going to say there was going to be following on from what you were talking about.
Blah, blah, blah. The video will sort that out. It's fine.
Video's going to sort that out, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know me on the call or anything else, so Lorna McAteer, fleet manager, been dabbling around with EVs for just a wee while now. Mainly started in the truck side of things and everything else, and now I'm at National Grid. So I kind of have two hats that I wear. One where I'm myth busting National Grid stuff, and one where I'm still myth busting whether you can drive your electric vehicle in the rain, and whether you can charge your electric vehicle in the rain, and am I allowed to take it through floods? Believe it or not, these are genuine questions that many of us in fleet management have probably had asked of us at some point and had to answer. And yes is the answer to all of those, although you shouldn't really be taking any vehicle through floods, actually. They're definitely not boats. So going on with some other little fact finding and myth busting, and kind of putting more of my national grid hat on rather than the fleet manager hat. So I'm watching Nigel's comments coming through about Scotch mist on EV and trucks. He needs to go and talk to Carlos, doesn't he, and find out what's going on over in the other world.
Oh yes.
There's quite a lot happening in trucks. Yeah.
Oh, that Volta truck was amazing at the ITT hub. Who wouldn't want to come and join the fleet industry and drive one of those things? It was fab.
Pure passion.
Absolutely. So some of the things I was going to touch on, and without trying to steal what Neil was going to talk about from last week, one of the other documents that was published last week was just some fun facts from the EU. So the EU published their aims for carbon and net zero and everything else, part of which is their plan to have EV charging points on their major roads every 60 kilometres and every 150 kilometres to have hydrogen fueling stations. So that was a big thing that came out from the EU. They're doing their Fit for 55. It's a huge document. If you want to go and have some bedtime reading, just go away and read that, where they're trying to get to 55% reduction in emissions. And they have also announced that they will be 100% ZEV by 2035. So that's a big change coming through, and of course we're still linked into our vehicles coming over from the EU. So going on to my grid myth busting stuff, I'm going to start with what grid isn't and what grid doesn't do. So grid doesn't make energy, grid doesn't sell energy, grid doesn't buy energy. We move it. We're just like trucks, really. We just move A to B. We just cart things around and we move the electricity around. And so the other myth busting question I always get is, can the grid cope? The answer is yes, it can. And considering we've got about 290,000 EVs on the road using about 1 terawatt throughout the year of power, we produce that daily. And we produce this power, sorry, we don't produce the terawatts daily, we produce gigawatts daily. But we produce enough power that will last us all the way through. And, you know, proving innovation at work and necessity being the mother of invention, one of my all-time favorite quotes, by the way. At Grid, we expect the trillionth kilowatt hour from renewables to be generated next year. And to put that into context, the first 500 billion took almost 50 years to produce. The last half was 5 years. So we are really moving down that renewable side of things and putting that power in. You know, we're building 40 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. So we're at 10 at the moment and we're building that by 2030. So innovation is there and it is happening. So can the grid cope? Yes, it can. Is it in all the right places right now? Probably not, but it's going to get there. You know, it takes time to put it into place. It's iterative and it will get there. And we know that the grid is also steadily decarbonising and has been since 2013. So there's a 66% reduction in carbon and it's working its way down. So it was 199 grams per kilowatt hour for year to date. And that was a few months ago because I haven't got my latest stats. So I'm just reading all these comments that are coming in. The one thing that most people won't register, because to us, EVs are everything for us at the moment, but actually getting EVs in vehicles is a drop in the ocean compared to changing heat over. And I'm going to leave you with that one.
Oh.
Perfect. So if you want any more myths busting, then Lorna will be here all day. So and stick them in the Q&A tab. So should we give Neil some more time?
Hey,
Oh,
here he
good.
goes.
Apologies for that.
All right.
Yeah.
Just put in presentation view.
Yep.
That's all we've got time for, Neil, but thanks very much.
Any questions?
And you're out of time.
Right, so keep it punchy just to make up for my inadequacies earlier. you may be aware that the transport decarbonisation strategy was released last Wednesday after much delay. And I'm going to withhold my opinion about the delays. We finally got what we've been waiting for over 6-7 months. Okay, but the headlines are that there are a number of priorities across all transport modes. That's the really key thing. This, as much as we focus a lot on road transport here and more sort of mid-range cars and vans a lot of the time, it is across the piece, including that lovely phrase, active transport, which means using your feet. So there is a whole range of activities going on. I'm just going to highlight commitments, ambitions, and the consultations that have come from it. You can see these are the 6 strategic priorities. I won't go through these in this slide. What I will do is I will go on to this slide because it talks about co-benefits, and frankly, these are actually the real benefits that we need, right? So this is what it's all about. We need to be in a nicer place. We need to be reducing congestion. We need to be having healthier, happier lives, and we need economic growth and success. Okay, so it's good that these things are in there and they're actually very well articulated. But there's 202 pages. So it's a little bit heavy reading in places, but there's some really good stuff in there. Maybe not as game-changing as I might like to have thought, given that it was delayed to be more ambitious, but really, really important that we don't lose sight of the fact that this isn't about swapping an ICE vehicle for a zero emission vehicle. That would not define success. Okay, it is actually about improving quality of life, transport infrastructure, air quality, and all the decarbonisation benefits that come from it. The interesting thing about this plan is it doesn't cover climate change mitigation, and it doesn't cover all the embedded carbon issues of transportation. It's just around how we motivate people to change their behavior, and we don't just swap one car or one bike for another, or one truck for another, or one train for another. Okay, so yes, it's really important that we focus on those things. The so what's, okay, in terms of across the modes, people will, I'm sure, be familiar with the fact that over half of our domestic emissions from transport come from cars and taxis. Okay, and then there's a whole chunk that come from sort of commercial vehicles, and actually then, you know, the airplanes and shipping are relatively small fry compared to the others, but equally important in terms of stuff that needs doing. All right, so the priorities are that there are 45 commitments within the strategy, including 11 consultations and green papers. So alongside Wednesday's strategy pack came the Jet Zero Aviation consultation, a non-ZEV HGV phase out consultation, regulatory form for CO2 emissions for road vehicles, and a rail environmental policy framework. Okay, so they've all been launched at the same time. And then it covers a whole other range, coaches and buses, 2- and 3-wheelers, and new vessels, all with phase out dates or targets to be defined, as well as things around code of practice for mobility as a service, which is a big topic, a lot of conversation. And then a big push around UK domestic flights and airport operations being net zero by 2040, as well as mandating this sustainable aviation fuel, or SAFs as you'll hear it called. Okay, but as I said, separate plans for the whole sort of carbon mitigation and national adaptation plan, but 202 pages full of stuff. No photos, Johnny, no photos. Okay, I've done a little bit more work, which I'm not going to share today, just to try and summarize it into investments, measures, ambitions, consultations, and headlines across the areas. So we're probably going to do something in terms of sharing that a bit more. Okay, but really the critical thing that we need to focus on is the fact that this is about mode shift. There is a lot in the plan that talks about significantly increasing car sharing, or the average number of occupants in a vehicle. There is a commitment in there to have the first zero emission transport city in the UK. Okay, there's then a lot of commitments around doubling the amount of journeys that take place on foot or bike in towns and cities across the UK. All right, so it's not just about vehicles and charging. Really important that people don't get stuck on that's what it's all about, because it isn't. There's so much more. I think that'll do it.
I think you got the timer there as well. Just made it.
Great work, Neil.
Yeah, we're just all absorbing that, I think. Are we going to do a Q&A separately, or can I start asking questions?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Go for it. Get fired.
I thought it was quite motivating. I thought that it was right down the middle of where it should be. It wasn't too extreme, and therefore we wouldn't achieve it. I didn't find it under ambitious either. The thing that gets me though is, do you feel it had enough to start the ball rolling and get people on a step-by-step program to get them to where they need to be, like Fit 55 does? That one's got quite specifics about what you can do, and low-hanging fruit followed by slightly harder to reach. So how did you feel when you read all of that and produced that fantastic document for us?
Yeah, two overwhelming thoughts that came out. An absence of sufficient measurement, i.e. defining how these things would be gauged as progressing and successing.
And benchmarking, right? I didn't see much about benchmarking.
Exactly. So that whole piece around where are we now, where do we need to get to? I mean, they headlined the fact that there would be timescale targets and milestones. They're quite few, sadly, and there's a lot of stuff, and it's much vaunted in terms of other people's assessments. There's a lot of reliance on future technologies delivering some of the gap, right, which is actually quite disappointing. However, there's some very clear signposts, and for those people that are not immersed in this like we are, actually those signposts are vitally important. So I think in the way it's articulated in the summary sections, and it's displayed in terms of the infographics, like the one I shared around the other benefits, then it's definitely a good guide to help people understand where we are heading.
It's the same problem as everything, right? It's really good for us in our industry. It really helps us. But if you ask around your friends and family, I don't know if they've seen these summaries. I don't know if they realize the magnitude of the problem. And that's why it's so important to us as a community to today take this message forward into our own networks, get on your socials and use fact rather than fiction. That's what today's whole quiz is about, is debunking myths and moving forward with genuine information. Popular
news was they don't know how they're going to decarbonize air flight. That was what really hit.
Yeah, which was annoying because they did have a whole section on that. So they just got bored and couldn't read that bit. I expect.
Yeah, they needed some headlines, right? And so they went down that route because being on holiday and flying away on holiday seems to be quite a topical issue right now.
John's got his hand in the air. What a good boy.
It's just to ask a really sort of general question, really. Why don't people care? Why is it that we've got a decarbonisation plan that comes out and frankly nobody knows about it? It's just gone under the radar, and we know because we're anoraks, but it's just not cutting through in the way that other issues are. So COVID is a classic example of where we've managed to get all this resource to deal with a really serious issue. Climate change is no different. Climate change, as we've seen in Europe this last week, is causing people to die. And I'm not being alarmist about that. It's a fact. Why is it we don't give a toss? Why is it that we put reports out, but we've got little going on? Am I losing the plot?
No, go.
I don't know if the answer. I don't know if I know the answer, but I think it's not that people don't give a toss, John. I just think that it doesn't. I'm thinking back when you asked that question. The immediate thing that sprung to mind was the ultra low emission zone in London a few years back, and it was years and years and years in the consultation phases. And it's only when it got to a few weeks away, everyone suddenly waved their hands in the air, going, "I don't know how I'm going to change my fleet because I haven't got ready for it." It's like you've had years to plan for it, and I think people perhaps wait until the very last minute on some of this stuff. And if there isn't a marker in the sand, and the ban on petrol and diesel in 2030 is one of those markers, and it'll take 2 or 3 years prior to that, and everyone's going, hang on a minute, or even though you've known about it for a decade, it'll be the last stage. People go. So I think things like this, you kind of have to put something material on it, and then a timeline that makes people feel like it's going to affect them in a short period of time, for people to suddenly, they know about it, but they don't necessarily care about it until it's right on their doorstep, and they've got to make a material difference to the way that their lives are run before it becomes real in the wider audience.
Spot on. we've got really like a bonbon. Think about it like a bonbon. At each end, we've got passionate people, the deniers and ourselves, right? And then it slims out a bit, and then there's this big slug in the middle, right? And basically, that's a group of people that until it affects what their next step is, not interested.
Exactly. And it's the behavior change curve. I back everything that Neil's saying and Sam's saying. So until it actually affects you and you can see the steps in front of you and you're ready to make that commitment, be that a trigger point in your life, something that's spoken to you and your family and your ethos, you won't do it. So it's not about not caring at all. It's about not knowing how to care or when to care or how to progress with your caring. And that's why I felt that the plan should really have had some sort of tangible steps, but this is early days. It's supposed to be this part of the bonbon now. We're supposed to be doing this bit. We need to unwrap the bonbon, dish the bonbons out, and choose the right flavour for everyone.
With all due respect, we've known the bonbons have been there for 10 years. We've been in the sweetie shop and we've known that this has been happening, and nobody is unwrapping, or few are unwrapping the bonbon. We've got the thought leaders. You know,
I love bonbons.
Lorna's a classic example of somebody who's just said, do you know what, I'm going to go and do this because I know it's the right thing to do. And it's been a hard battle. But the great unwashed don't care. They are still out there buying their SUVs, their diesels, and they couldn't care less. And I worry sometimes that we're in this little group of people who we all get it, we all understand, we all love and hug each other. But actually, we've got a duty to stand up and be counted. We have government who are not setting the right targets. They're not doing enough. And we kind of let that happen. We've got politicians, Green Party politicians, who are more interested in other issues than saving the planet. I'm just kind of like, come on, people. We need to find a way of making the bonbons something we can actually put in our mouths and get on with eating them.
What gives me the most hope about making bonbons more palatable is actually it's the policy framework piece, right? And because, like we've done with cars, we're now going to do it with bikes, motorbikes, vans and trucks and ships. It's going to be mandated as to when those have to be phased out for new sale. That's the biggest thing that can be done. The challenge is now that the industry's got to wade through that consultation, and we all know there's going to be a lot of people throwing the anchors and the brakes on to try and slow that down because of vested interests.
Well, ports have got their own decarbonisation strategy. Anyway, oh look, Paul, sorry.
Thank you. I was even getting tired. I was almost holding my hand in the air. So one of the things so some sweeties are more popular than others, to go back to this thing, and some sweeties are given away. And the sweeties that are being given away at the moment are the cars, because they are literally being handed out with a pay rise. You know, go and take the keys to your electric car. And John, actually, last month, electric outsold diesel for the first time ever. So if the right message is given and the right incentive is given, then we will change people's behavior. We're not actually changing their behavior. We're just facilitating a selfish approach to, decarbonisation. What's in it for me? If there's enough in it for me, I'll make the change. And the trouble with a large element of the decarbonisation is that there's very little that you can do for individuals to incentivize that transition. For van drivers, for truck drivers, they're not going to be the people that make that change, but it's the companies that are behind them. And we're not seeing those bigger kind of heavier incentives around that transition. Now, Lorna's got her hand up, so I'm going to pass over to Lorna.
So sorry, just
only because you know me by now and I'm the positive one. So one thing that TDP did, and the Fit for 55 and the plan to 2035 and the consultation that's coming out on hydrogen that's yet to be released and all these other papers, it's the first time, and somebody's commented on it, actually the government for the first time have brought all this together holistically. They are looking at this all over the piece. And I'm not one normally to go and defend the government, but I have to here. They have brought this together. They have tried to make a statement before COP26. They are putting their markers in the sand. They have put some targets in place. And what they have turned around and said, we're not stopping you moving. We're just trying to change the way you do things and get you to behaviourally change. But they are also not backing down on those dates. So for anyone out there that thinks this is going to go away and can still behave like an ostrich, forget it. You are living in cloud cuckoo land. This is happening whether you want it to or not. And the government have done that in those documents. They have brought this together. They don't have all the answers yet. None of us have all the answers yet. This is why we're still working through it. And this is why that fact I talked about, the innovation and the trillionth power of renewables. We are moving. Yes, we are relying on new technology. Can't speak now. Too passionate. We are relying on new technology, but it is coming. And we have to remember what was around 5 years ago that we thought wasn't here is here now.
Yeah.
So in another 5 years, God only knows what we can do.
Yeah, and the really encouraging thing is a number of the dates have been set as at the latest, right? So there is a drive that these things will happen sooner, right? There's certainly a perspective that the vehicle, car fleet and van fleet stuff will happen sooner because of, in fact, the exact words are an ongoing package of financial and non-financial incentives. All right. So in terms of behavioral nudges, okay, in terms of addressing the psychological need for change, the biggest behavioral nudge they can give is an effective pay rise by, essentially your cost of having a company vehicle gets slashed dramatically. How they apply that to some of the other transport pieces is interesting. Probably the most telling thing I saw was around the fact that they're going to introduce a travel voucher scheme for low carbon or green travel. And they're going to deploy that through companies and charities and organizations.
20 years later, it's very hard not to get discouraged by how many times we've all said that so many times, and not to get too technical about it, but instead of doing SIL payments, Section 106, all the payments that the councils make to the local authorities should technically, I should think, be used for zero emission mobility.
Yep.
And they finally cottoned on. So is that not a celebratory point?
Yes, absolutely.
I hope so. Johnny's got his hand up now. I don't want to get in trouble.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry to interrupt this discussion, and I'm really enjoying these sweet analogies. But now it's time for some Smarties, or at least one.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Seamless.
I'm referring to Dr. Ewan McTurk, actually. So at least one Smartie in the tube. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you. Yeah. So, fascinating discussion so far today, definitely. And I thought I would do a little presentation. Covers basically the importance of what we're doing today, the importance of answering these questions about and challenges to electric vehicles. So I I'm basically a tame electrochemist. I've spent the last decade working in various different battery labs, building them up, as well as working within them on cutting edge battery tech. And over that time, I've been driving electric vehicles as well. So out of the many different conferences that I've been to, I've come across a number of different questions, not just down the kind of battery technology kind of route, but also the wider implications of electric vehicles. Because as well as doing this electrochemistry side of things, I've also been at various kind of wider public outreach events too. The main challenges that I've seen to electric vehicles, I would say, can be put into three different categories. The first of which is the naysayers, the ones who make outright statements that EVs won't work or aren't better for the environment. They rarely present any evidence to back this up. And they'll quite often cite discredited sources, for example. And also they'll quite often be given a voice in opinion columns in newspaper articles. So annoyingly, they get the chance to spout this certifiable nonsense. You can easily disprove it, but they'll run away before you have a chance to counter it. But yeah, I think quite a lot of that actually comes back to an earlier comment that was made about why don't people care. I think a lot of it is to do with stubbornness. It's the I'm all right, Jack syndrome. I don't see climate change affecting my house, my family, therefore I'm not going to act on it. And there's an immaturity about not wanting to change to something that could turn out that they actually enjoy better, i.e. driving an electric vehicle rather than a diesel or a petrol. The other one, which is the very sneaky category, is misinformation. So there are claims that a competing technology is more convenient or somehow greener than EVs. And this is usually presented by people who have a competing product to sell and who perceive EVs as being a threat to their business. And a perfect example of this is the self-charging comment that was made in the comments section earlier. So people have been misinformed by Toyota and more recently by Honda, Kia, and numerous other, mainly Japanese manufacturers. Kia is a South Korean manufacturer, so it's quite worrying to see that trend of self-charging misinformation leaving the confines of Japan. But this is, it's a very hydrogen-based automotive industry in Japan at the moment, and as a result, they're trying to eke out their old petrol hybrid technology for as long as possible until they can get the hydrogen stuff up and running. Although ironically, they are also working on advanced battery tech too. So yeah, this is actually enough to convince people who don't come from a technical background that a petrol car can magically recharge itself without any external influence. And that's incredibly worrying, because these are truth-twisting statements which will result in people being ripped off and are resulting in people being ripped off. But amongst all of these questions that we're getting, we are seeing genuine questions. People who've been looking for real scientific answers to very valid questions on raw material supply, grid demand, ethics, running costs, the works. And quite often these people get caught in the crossfire on social media debates or at EV conferences. And a very good example I saw actually was at a conference I was at in Edinburgh a few years ago, where they were talking about the rise of electric vehicles in Norway, which has the highest uptake per capita. So many questions along those lines went unanswered by the panel because they didn't know the answer because it was too technical. So they just kind of ummed and ahed and kind of fobbed off the people who were asking these valid questions. They didn't get a decent answer. So when I eventually managed to get hold of the mic, I did not let it go for 4 minutes. I answered each and every one of those questions and made sure that everyone got the answer they deserved. So I decided to do something about this. And in 2018, I started Plug Life Television. This YouTube channel has come about purely to answer the questions that people have and rarely get a decent answer to. So there's now a wealth of resource available on YouTube. Typically, if there's a question to do with electric vehicles, there'll be a Plug Life Television episode on it. And that includes, will the grid be able to cope? Will they have enough raw materials? As well as more kind of electrochemical questions as well, like what's actually happening within the battery. The complex electrochemistry is explained in a way that just about anyone can understand. So it's quite a broad resource there. And over this time of creating Plug Life Television and also attending conferences, being on panel sessions, etc., I've seen a number of myths and assertions that keep popping up. One of them is that EVs are more expensive than petrol or diesel cars. They look at the purchase price, they don't look at the running costs. EVs are unreliable or expensive to maintain. They're worried about the batteries being short-lived and being unable to be recycled. They say that the national grid will melt if all vehicles were electric. And they say that we're going to run out of the raw materials for EV batteries. And this final question actually has quite a lot in common with the people who say, oh, you don't want an electric car, you want one of those self-charging ones, because no one's really thought about the implications of that self-charging technology and how that gets refilled. Hydrogen or synthetic fuels are the answer, because that fuel suddenly just magically appears out of nowhere from unicorn farts. It doesn't require any energy to make like electricity does. This is such a common thing that I've seen. But in amongst all of those, there are genuine questions. The people who aren't just asserting it and flat out denying that there could possibly be another viewpoint, or not just a viewpoint, sorry, empirical scientific evidence that proves that actually the opposite is true. There are people out there who are genuinely asking, are EVs more expensive? Are they reliable? Are the batteries short-lived, or how long do they last? Can we recycle the batteries? Can the national grid cope, etc.? So let me know if you can't hear the volume on this video, because I've attempted to answer all of these questions in 1 minute. This video is not sped up. So it's going to be a challenge to cram them into 60 seconds, but let's give it a go. Let's get the timer on. So I drive electric for a whole bunch of good reasons, but the ones you're probably wondering about the most are, is it going to save me money? Is it reliable? And is it actually as green as it's cracked up to be? My Nissan Leaf here saves me £1,300 a year versus an equivalent size petrol or diesel car. That figure is nearer £1,600 a year if I was to switch to an electricity tariff that had a cheaper rate overnight. Are they reliable? Yes, electric cars will last hundreds of thousands of miles without issue because they are so mechanically simple. The batteries are brilliant as well. They're lasting hundreds of thousands of miles too, and they're getting better all the time. Once they eventually die in an electric car, they can be fully recycled, but before that, they actually get used again in energy storage because they've still got capacity left in them. Are they going to melt the national grid? Absolutely not. The national grid have said so themselves. They like the fact that they actually tend to get charged overnight when there's excess renewables, so they actually approve of electric vehicles. The materials that go into batteries, are they scary? No, there's billions of tons of lithium in the world. You don't actually need much in a lithium-ion battery. Cobalt is being phased out. What about hydrogen and synthetic fuels? Well, if you're producing those from renewable energy too, you actually require 2 to 3 times as much energy, if not more, to produce the fuels to power a car the same distance as it would be to just stuff the electricity into a battery and do it that way. So electric cars are not only far more efficient, but they're always going to be cheaper to run as well. And we are out of time. I'm actually slightly over, sorry. But yeah, check out Plug Life Television because I go into a lot more detail as into why I drive electric and why it makes sense.
Wow.
So there we go. You can find Plug Life Television on YouTube and also on pluglifetelevision.co.uk. And following the success of Plug Life Television, I launched Plug Life Consulting. So I'm now helping business, academia, government and industry on a wide range of projects to do with not just battery electric industry, but energy storage systems, electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. Things are quite busy at the moment, but I'm always up for discussing any exciting projects that people have on the go or want to get on the go. It's everything's on the up at the moment in this sector. And it's certainly interesting to be involved and to be able to provide some of my knowledge to be able to assist people who are doing some exciting things. So consulting at pluglifetelevision.co.uk. Feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much for your time.
Brilliant. That's amazing, Ewan. Best 60 seconds on EV Cafe, that was. Some people said they've subscribed. People love the 1 minute. Yeah, great. And JC, we've got a couple of questions, so maybe we should go over to the mailroom.
Yeah, let's do that. So Darren Anviner, bless his heart, because he's getting stuck in this week. How can we educate people better on self-charging hybrids? Because they're not really proper EVs. And can you explain he's had to explain the difference to so many people. So Ewan, how do we get around this self-charging hybrid miscommunication, unicorn fairy dust lies?
John, before Ewan answers that one, can I just add another flavouring, which I've seen in the advertising of cars lately, which is winding me up as well, which is these electric cars powered by mild hybrid.
Oh God, yeah. Basically just glorified stop-start.
Yeah, so that's the next flavour I fear is going to be we've had self-charging, they've exhausted that nonsense, and now there's another flavour of it. So there's two. So it might be worth just explaining that one as well, Ewan, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so as I kind of alluded to there, first of all, you've got mild hybrid, which is just a glorified stop-start thing. So all that vehicle can do is switch off its engine whenever it comes to a stop. It has a slightly bigger lead-acid battery than a normal car. So the starter, it basically means it can start the starter motor a few more times before it runs flat. So it switches off the engine at traffic lights, and then when you start moving away again, it switches the petrol engine back on. There is there's definitely no electric only driving capability, and there's generally very little electric assist to the petrol motor, if at all. So yeah, mild hybrid is, to be honest, any fuel savings are minimal. They're probably negated by the additional cost of the mild hybrid system. It is an absolute false economy. As for self-charging hybrids, I'm just going to post a link in the chat. I told you there's a Plug Life episode for everything. So I actually go through all of the different details of the propulsion system, the main propulsion systems. You've got the so-called self-charging hybrid, which is just a standard petrol hybrid, the plug-in hybrid, and the pure electric vehicle. And I show that actually it depends on, is there such a thing as a self-charging hybrid? It's a yes and a no answer, and it depends on how you define the self-charging, because if it self-charges using regenerative braking, an electric car does it as well. So an electric car is self-charging. A plug-in hybrid recharges using regenerative braking, so it's self-charging too. If the self-charging hybrid is charging using the petrol engine, guess what? A plug-in hybrid does that as well. So all of a sudden, plug-in hybrids are self-charging. What is a really fun thing to do, apart from sharing that video and making sure that people who think that their new self-charging Toyota Prius is just going to magically run on unicorn farts, you need to teach them that it's all 100% petrol powered. There's no way to plug it in There's no additional source of electricity. You know, if you were to leave that car on your driveway with a flat battery and an empty petrol tank, it is not going to be able to recharge itself at all. But the other thing to do is whenever you see an advert for a so-called self-charging hybrid, ask them, you know, in the comments section, how does it self-charge? And then when they say using regenerative braking or using the petrol engine, you say, oh, like a plug-in hybrid or like a petrol or like an electric car. So those are self-charging as well, right? And then just watch as the poor individual in the customer services team's head explodes because they end up in this kind of, you know, infinite loop of just complete rubbish logic. So yeah, I mean, it is utterly misleading and it does need to be challenged, especially because naive people are buying these thinking that they're going to be cheaper to run than a conventional petrol car, let alone an electric car, and they very quickly find that they're actually very expensive to run, these standard hybrids or mild hybrids.
Thank you, Ewan. I guess
Sorry, I just want to point out Paul was speaking.
Yeah.
I was on mute. I was on mute.
He
Anybody?
finally got
Bingo.
and he was on mute.
Anyway, so what I was going to say was, it's really important to do that proper total cost of ownership analysis because, you know, we've talked about pure costs here, and there's a conversation going on in the chat around hybrids and, you know, plug-in hybrids and 85% use of electric, and actually where you absolutely have to, and it's a stepping stone, and you are thoroughly working with this hybrid to move towards an electric transition. Listen, I respect that because, you know, people are moving in the right direction, and there are, you know, I think there's trucks and vans and cars in the fleet. So although there isn't any plug-in hybrids really in the van or truck world. But the point is, it's about thinking holistically. And one of the important things about, you know, EVs in particular is downtime, particularly in the commercial vehicle world. There's much less parts to go wrong, much less to check on a daily basis if you're running trucks, much less much less accidents. Statistically, it seems that the early evidence would suggest around a 25% reduction in accidents, which is a massive reduction to downtime and replacement vehicles and all those kinds of things. So when you're doing your analysis and when you're looking at your costs, do look at the full 3 or 4 year period and do really incorporate everything, including that lost time that you have for maintenance. John.
I just wonder, Nigel Boyle is being particularly supportive of the self-charging hybrid in the chat.
No, he's not. It's plug-in hybrids he's supporting. He's not supporting self-charging.
My apologies. So plug-in hybrids, and he's saying that he puts precious little fuel into his vehicle, done 5,000 miles, puts precious little in because he's plugging in as a hybrid vehicle with some electric capacity, early 30s miles per charge. Yeah. Have they got their place? Because that is subtly different. The plug-in hybrid is better because you can do pure electric driving if you choose for 30 odd miles. Whereas with a self-charging hybrid, it's all generated from the fuel, essentially.
Maybe Sam will know. Let's ask Sam if he likes plug-in hybrid.
Well, I was going to say, John, there's another point there that Nigel put in about 5,000 miles. So it's obviously he's doing 5,000 miles a year. So he's doing very low mileage. So he's able to do a lot of his driving, I suspect, on the EV only, on the battery only. But then the argument is, well, why just have an EV in its entirety if you're going to do low mileage?
Yeah, and that's fair enough. I think, but what I was trying to get to was that we're a broad church, you know, and there are those who are able to reduce their emissions, whether it be a little bit through, you know, hybrid technology has been around since 97, and it has made a contribution to cleaning up our air quality and reducing emissions. It is a marginal, small improvement, but it is an improvement, and we need to reflect that.
Sorry, John. Ewan had his hand up, so.
Yeah. So in terms of plug-in hybrids, I actually did a comparison of the Renault Capture plug-in hybrid versus the Renault Zoe, which is actually, although one's a crossover and one's perceived to be a super mini, the Zoe is actually quite a big car. So they do have the same height, they have, you know, roughly the same storage capacity, etc. Actually, the Zoe is slightly bigger than the PHEV for boot room, etc. But it's also cheaper. The Zoe is cheaper than the Capture plug-in hybrid, and there's quite a few plug-in hybrids that are either more expensive or not that much cheaper than the electric equivalent. So bearing in mind that generally the electrical economy of a plug-in hybrid tends to be a little bit less than an electric vehicle. And also it tends to be a lot slower to charge. It's also considerably smaller range. It will take hours to take on 20 or 30 miles worth of range versus half an hour to take on 200 miles of range at a high power charger. Yeah, I mean, plug-in hybrids, I would say with the latest advances in battery tech, arguably they've had their time. What we find is that a lot of plug-in hybrid drivers quickly realize that this, the electric only mode of it is brilliant, and they wish they had more range, and they wish they had the ability to rapid charge it. So yes, it's a stepping stone, but to be honest, the tech has now got to the point where you can get an MG with about 200 miles worth of range, and that's a good family estate car for about 25 grand, and then obviously leasing and PCP makes that even more approachable, even more accessible for the wider population. Do PHEVs really still have a relevance, especially given that their petrol engines tend to have poor fuel economy versus a conventional petrol or diesel vehicle, or indeed versus some of the more efficient hybrids, which even then aren't that great in terms of their efficiency versus other petrol and diesel cars. Prime example, the latest Toyota Prius, I was quite surprised at how low its fuel economy is. The Mark I Honda Insight, which admittedly is a two-seater space capsule of a car, is a hybrid from over 20 years ago, which does 70 miles per gallon at 70 miles an hour without even trying. That was peak ICE. And we've never really had anything that's been anywhere near as efficient as that since then. Admittedly, not a family car, it is a two-seater space capsule. But yeah, we're just seeing more and more desperation to try and eke out the life of the internal combustion engine. And quite a lot of the efficiency measures and the pollution control measures have made them gutless and unenjoyable to drive. Whereas EV gives you back all of that power and torque and then some with zero exhaust emissions.
Therein,
I will say,
Paul,
just real quick, because we need to move on to our quiz to be embarrassed and abused by the wider public. But the point is, at the moment, if we were successful, not everybody could do what we want them to do. So it's almost, because there's a lot of combustion engine out there. There's a lot of OEMs that are producing plugins of a combustion engine, and I'm not going to advocate that. They should move to electric, but they can't. There is time behind this. It takes time to move over, and the reality is 3 or 4% of all electric commercial or all commercial vehicles are electric. So we've got to find ways of taking the combustion engine and using it and kind of getting them to the point where they can move on. And I would never advocate PHEV, but the reality is we're going to have all sorts for a little while longer. And when we focus in on air quality and the NOx in our inner cities, a Euro 6 diesel is actually, from a van point of view, forget it for cars, but for a van point of view, is a better option than the existing for Euro 5, Euro 4, whatever. We need to improve moment by moment, step by step. And we've got to accept that there are going to be vehicles coming onto the market, probably not new vehicles coming onto the market, but existing vehicles that need to be sold at the end of the day. Neil
needs another ice lolly.
There is a very specific commitment in the transport decarbonisation strategy to address significant change in final mile delivery program. All right, so that's another factor influencing what you're just talking about in terms of the emissions in cities or in towns. It's a very specific ambition. At the moment, I've not yet found a specific target or timescale on it, but it's quite clearly there in their ambition list.
Yeah.
John, we've got a few questions still remaining in the mailroom. So do you want to run through them and then we can get to Mastermind?
Yeah. Okay. So Ewan, one for you. Ansel Boucher asks, including embedded carbon, is an EV a lower emitter of carbon than an equivalent powered petrol car, assuming that it's charged with 100% renewable energy?
Absolutely, yeah. So in fact, I'm going to start with it not being charged with 100% renewable energy. In fact, I have an episode that gives all of the answers here, but whilst I'm finding the link to post on the chat. So if you look at the embodied carbon of battery manufacture, well, for a Nissan Leaf 62 kilowatt hour, you're typically looking at about, well, actually, it's not so much the embodied carbon, it's the embodied energy. Embodied energy does not need to be embodied carbon. If you produce the car in a low carbon environment, like the Tesla Gigafactory with its on-site renewables, like Nissan Sunderland with its on-site solar PV array, and mostly nuclear and wind power in the immediate area of the national grid, then the embodied carbon of that battery pack comes way down. So for that Nissan Leaf, it's about 15,500 kilowatt hours of embodied energy in that 62 kilowatt hour battery pack. But overall, if that was to be produced on a carbon intensive grid like South Korea, which does have some nuclear, not very much renewables, and is still quite reliant on fossil fuels, then you're looking at about 7 or 8 tons of embodied carbon. But if you're doing it using 100% renewables, I believe that figure goes down to under a ton, and that's including the embodied carbon of the solar panels, wind turbines, whatever, that we're actually producing that electricity. So it's not just saying, oh, renewables are zero. You're being, properly stringent about your calculations there. And then if you were to charge it using the National Grid UK average carbon intensity, that's about 240 watt hours. 240 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. And if you were to use renewables, then obviously that goes way down to worst case scenario of about 44 or 45. And that's for solar power. But that figure for that embodied carbon comes from about 7 years ago. Chances are the factories making solar panels are now even lower carbon. So that figure will be even less. Anyway, point being that over 160,000 miles, which is a typical lifespan for an internal combustion engine vehicle. The electric car will still be going strong by that point. The electric car will save about 20 tons of CO2 versus an equivalent petrol car. And that's if it was built on a carbon intensive grid. So that's your Chinese and your South Korean vehicles that are being shipped over. Or it will save upwards of 40 tons of CO2 if it's built and powered using renewable energy. On top of that, those calculations do take into account the refining of the petrol, but it doesn't take into account the extraction of the oil, which could actually chuck the carbon emissions for the petrol vehicle up even further by up to about 40% for the fuel proportion of that calculation. So it's a conservative estimate to say that built and run using renewables, you're saving 40 tons of CO2 per car.
Boom.
So to put it another way, yes.
Oh yeah, substantially, yes.
How is that? How can any human being have all that in their heads and not explode? Just
a lot of sleuthing, a lot of number crunching.
You're an absolute legend. I understood every single word of that as English, but
amazing.
0 cents.
John, it was Scottish, not English.
Fair enough. Not your fault, mate. Mine. You are a legend. Now, Willem Bartman, who we met at the ITT Hub, and Willem,
we did.
What a legend. Would you agree that hydrogen internal combustion engines are a doable solution for the agriculture and long distance trucking segments? Ewan, keep it brief if you could.
Yep. Okay, why would you want to do internal combustion engines for hydrogen when a fuel cell does the same job much more efficiently, much more quietly, and much more reliably, and also doesn't produce NOx emissions? Because remember, you're not deliberately burning nitrogen in a petrol or diesel engine, but you get NOx out because the air is 80% nitrogen. The exact same happens with a hydrogen internal combustion engine vehicle. Internal combustion for hydrogen is a complete commercial and industrial irrelevance because it just means that you're going to be spending a lot more money on fuel and on maintenance when a fuel cell does the same job, cheaper, quieter, and far more reliably.
You seem to be on the fence there a bit, Ewan.
Yeah. No, honestly, the ICE thing is pointless for hydrogen.
Thanks, mate. Claudio Todaro asks, and I think this is one for Neil Durno, what are the most important and feasible commitments of the latest government plan?
And no speaking with your mouth full. And not on mute.
And off mute.
It's not just me.
Yeah. Anyway, I think the most important ones from my point of view are the movement over to rail. So there is a big commitment in there to significantly increase the capacity for freight and passenger rail. It does actually say rail and other low carbon modes or low carbon efficiency modes. And so that's going to drive that high vehicle occupancy. It's also going to drive how they're going to operate the rail network under the rail network decarbonisation framework. So that's certainly one of them, because that is an answer to a lot of freight miles and also decongestion. I think the second one really is around how they measure this move to active transport, and actually what they do to incentivize that move to active transport. Because when they say that they want twice as many journeys against 2019 done on foot in cities and towns, that's a really big change. That's a really, really big change. So, and that's the thing that's going to need the most behavioral shift, which either means they're going to have to wallop up charges for entering congestion zones or low emission zones, or they're going to have to look at the voucher scheme and say, how do we actually encourage and motivate people to go active transport rather than an emissions vehicle or a personal transport option?
Lorna McAteer's got her hands in the air.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add into that on the question as well. So some of the key points is the crystallising of dates. So as fleet managers, we now have targets. So if you're 26,000 tonnes and under as a vehicle, it's going to be a 2035 ban on your HGVs. If you're over 26,000 tonnes, it's going to be a 2040 ban. And cars and LCVs are still currently at 2030. So we now have clear targets in fleet. So if you're talking about statements that they've made and committed to, they are there. And they've also crystallised the grants and some of the BIK numbers up to 24, 25, and the home charging grant to 24, 25, if I'm remembering my dates right. And the van charging has been given an extra year, from what I understand, in terms of the grant as well. So there were some good dates in there and some good things that tangibly fleet managers can get hold of right now.
Yeah, so essentially what you're looking at on a number of these is you're probably looking at 3 to 4 cycles of asset cycling before you'd need to have your full fleet migrated. But obviously what they're also doing, especially with HGV, is they're bringing forward road trials for this year. Okay, so there will be vehicles on the road this year. And also Scotland announced very recently that they want to essentially use the Scottish highways network as a test bed for zero emission vehicles in the next, I think, 3 years. So yeah,
and geographically they're putting some of the trials around the country as well, so it's no longer London centric. You've got certain things happening in Wales with terms of hydrogen hubs, you got stuff in the north of England, as Neil said, Scotland. So there are things around and they're all different places and geographically spread as well.
Quick question on HS2 and whether that's considered to be a low carbon project. I would have said yes, because it's mass transit. Low carbon?
Wasn't that just to get everybody employed and doing some work again when we had a recession?
And could we not put all that effort into, well, let's get super fast broadband instead?
Anyway, should we start the quiz?
In order to stay positive,
I need a healthy dose of embarrassment.
I'm not going to mention HS2 because I'd like to stay positive.
Yes.
Good.
We'll go for the EV Mastermind quiz then, and we'll revisit some of the questions later on, John, shall we?
Yeah, let's. Although, yes, there are 2 new ones just crept in, cheeky boys and girls, because I just got rid of those. Right. Okay, so here it is, the quiz, the EV Mastermind Quiz. Now, we've had loads of questions sent in by people. Stupidly, I asked for questions. I didn't ask for answers to go with the question. No, I've no bloody idea whether they're right or wrong. But nonetheless, we will give it a go. So here we go. First question. Now,
do we have to get our buzzers?
Hands in the air like you just don't care. And my judgment is final, okay? This is open to everybody, guests and the usual crew, okay?
We'll never win a point.
Oh, stop whining. Okay, right, ready? What is the cheapest used electric vehicle on Auto Trader today? Johnny Berry.
I'm Eve.
Incorrect. Sarah was next.
I'm going to go Nissan Leaf.
Wrong. Neil Durno.
It's a Renault Ziggy.
Doesn't count.
Still wrong. Ewan.
Renault Fluence.
Wrong.
Oh.
Sam.
Gee whiz.
Gee whiz is the correct answer. So Sam gets 1 point. It is £2,100 today. It's done 45,000 miles and has got an MOT until April 2022.
I agree with Martin, by the way. It's not a real car.
The quadricycle, technically, it's quadricycle.
Yes.
All right, then. So in that case, we'll give also a point. Who said Nissan Leaf? Was it Sarah? Sarah said Nissan Leaf. So we'll go with Nissan Leaf at £3,500. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting. It's done 117,000 miles, and it's a 2012 version. So 9 years, 117,000 miles. Do not tell me you can't drive an electric car very far. £3,500. Thank you very much. Have some of that. Check the battery life on it. Go. Neil, you wanted to ask something.
I wanted to tell you that the Renault Twizy that I've got my eye on is 400 quid on eBay.
Oh, eBay. I said Auto Trader. You lose a point. You're at -1.
Yeah, -1.
Come on, listen to the question, you donut. Right. Okay. Next up. Oh, sorry. Did I just call one of our patrons a donut?
That's to go with his coffee.
Right. Next up, stand by your beds. There is a point for each name that you can give me for, according to the Zap Map research in 2021, can you top 5 public charging networks in the UK? Sarah.
Electronics. Oh no, just joking. It will be BP Pulse, Instabolt, and Osprey, plus. Well, they're kind of my favourites. Maybe I should say GridServe.
Dear God, 2. Instavolt Osprey is correct. So you get 2 marks.
Thank you.
Paul was next up.
Oh, bugger. No, I
out.
had an Instavolt and Osprey, but
You hesitated.
Bugger, I have to take your first answer. Sam.
No one said Tesla.
Tesla is number 1. Well
Of course
done.
it is, and it will be
Yeah.
GridServe next year. Just saying.
Yeah, but it's not. Ewan.
In order, 1st to 5th, I think they were Tesla, Instavolt, Osprey, Swarco eConnect, and PodPoint, or it might have been the other way around.
You have all of them. Wrong way round though. Swarco eConnect
not
was
good enough.
5th.
Yeah.
Podpoint was 4th. Osprey, Instavolt, and Tesla were number 1.
And I already said 2.
he
Please,
gets 2 points.
You get
Just
2
saying.
points, Ewan.
Anybody
I get one.
care what
Google
you
it.
think? This
Yes.
is my show. This is my quiz. I dish out the points. Ewan McTurk gets 3.
Googled it.
Sarah had already got 2. Don't care if you Googled it. Well done.
What
That's
about me? Can I have a point?
No, why would you get a point? Oh, no, he said Tesla.
Tesla.
He said Tesla.
I've slid you in a point. Okay, right. So next up, what's the highest kilowatt output charger you can have on a standard domestic single phase electricity supply in the UK?
Oh, Johnny's
Japan?
in. Johnny.
JB.
7 kilowatt.
How much?
7 kilowatt.
Is he right, Ewan?
No, 7.4.
10.4. Yeah.
7.4 is the
0.4.
correct answer, unless Ewan tells me otherwise.
Oh, very. That's embarrassing.
Yes, right.
Oh.
Paul Kirby
Sorry,
has
what was your job before this?
right. This is a technical one. So we go to our technical round now. And this question came in from Mark Stubbs. Thank you, Mark.
Oh.
Okay. On a plug-in hybrid, why do the maximum power and torque figures for the separate engine and electric motor not add up to the combined maximum power and torque figures for the drivetrain?
Great.
Say all that
question.
again in English.
Okay,
Yeah, can
on
you say
a
it
plug-in
again?
hybrid, why do the maximum power and torque figures for the separate engine and electric motor not add up to the combined maximum power and torque figures for the drivetrain? Sam.
Because the two drivetrains work in tandem, so it's not a 1+1. They kind of overlap in terms of their power consumption. So the net result of the total power is not 1+1. They overlap.
I gotta say you're right.
That was beautiful. That was
That's
lovely.
that's a bit like a GVW, isn't it? When you're comparing front axle weights and rear axle weights, and actually they don't equal the same as. There we go. See, Mr. Paul Kirby's
Ooh.
agreeing with me on that one.
See, now,
Some comments are saying that's not necessarily the right answer every time.
it's
though.
not every time, but
Don't care.
in general,
Point.
there are
But it's 66% of the time.
some other applications, some other vehicles do it a slightly different way, but generally speaking, you're right, Sam.
Paul's just on mute. He's just getting ragey because he's on mute.
He's
Look,
still
he's
on
still
mute.
on mute.
Just ignore
So-
it. It's fine.
Okay, whatever.
I mean, seriously, or best of order, please. Okay, next question. Again from Mark. We all know that the Renault Zoe used to charge at 43 kilowatts. But name a battery electric vehicle that can also charge at 43 kilowatts.
Look,
And that's
Johnny. Well
JB.
done, Johnny.
BYD.
BYD is correct. It's nice that
Well
you've
done.
It's nice that you've now got 1 mark.
I missed the ball. Come on.
That was geeky.
Hang on.
Okay.
Technically, the question's wrong because it should have said AC.
Oh, please.
That's a good point.
You know what he meant.
Come
Doesn't matter.
on. Okay, I missed out AC because I didn't want to. I thought the technical police would be after me.
Did you miss out? Did you miss out, or did Mark get it wrong? It's important.
Mark
Mark
got
got
it
GridServe.
Mark got it wrong. Right. Okay. So David Bushnell has sent in a question and he asks, what will the benefit in kind rates be for EVs in 2025? Paul?
2%.
2% is the right answer.
Oh, I thought it was very-
And
Okay.
that's a car. Just saying, everybody. I know what a car is as well.
Yeah, but do
Okay.
you know why? Do you know what the actual rates are each of the years, though?
Oh, Lorna.
Well,
Because we went 0, 1, and then we went
0,
2, 2.
1,
They kept
2,
it flat.
2. Yeah.
Two.
I only know it's the car one because that comes first and you have to read through it to get to vans.
Okay, I think there might be an advantage to one of our members in this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's from Keith Woodcock, a great friend of the show, who sent in the following. If I spent £6.24 on electricity at GridServe in Braintree, how much would I spend on coffee and cake?
4 times as much because I did it yesterday.
Lorna, you're excluded because you didn't put your hand up. Paul?
At £9.25.
£9.25 is the right answer. Lorna, how much did you spend?
No, we won't go into that.
All right. And so the final question, and this question comes with 4 marks. And this could make you the winner of the EV Café Mastermind Challenge just by getting this one right. Hands in the air. Stand by.
I'm going to mute everybody.
What is the difference between a kilowatt and a kilowatt hour?
Oh.
It was actually Johnny Berry first.
We can't have this one. We can't have this one.
He muted
You
us
can't have
and
this
he
one.
wasn't first.
Kilowatt is measure of
You can't have
power.
this one. We already
Kilowatt
did it.
hour is measure of capacity. Measure of storage.
Oh, now come on. Is it capacity
Oh.
or storage? They're different
You can't.
things.
We've already done this one.
Storage.
Can't
Ewan.
use this one.
So
It's a rod,
kilowatt
so you
is
can't
do it.
an
We've
instantaneous unit of power, whereas kilowatt hour is cumulative energy.
So he's wrong then.
Excuse fancy
He
words.
is wrong. And Ewan is correct. Ewan McTurk wins the
Well done, Ewan.
EV Mastermind Quiz with 7 points.
Very deserved. Very, very
Thank you very
deserved.
much. I've even just posted a video that explains kilowatt.
Oh.
Goodness me.
Oh.
Sorry, should we change our background to Plug Life Telly?
Yeah.
Go for it.
But what is really shocking is
Like
that
plug life telly.
we did do that question in rehearsals because we do rehearse this nonsense. And still, Ewan beat us.
Can I just say we gave the wrong answer then, and you said it was right.
Yeah, we
okay.
did actually give the wrong answer on the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to that.
So
I had
Every
to
day's a
edit-
school
I had
day
to
on
edit
the
out
Saturday.
Sarah's answer because it was so wrong.
I was hoping that you'd do it again.
The alternative answer to that last question is a kilowatt hour is the measure of the capacity of the battery pack on the spec sheet, whereas a kilowatt is the measure of capacity of the battery pack told to you by the dealer.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, true. Very true.
But thank you to everybody who sent in questions because they were absolutely superb. That last one came from Paul Barnfather. Paul, if you're still with us, you're sick. Thank you kindly.
Absolutely terrifying. However, it does bring home a good point that even us in the industry still occasionally get things wrong. And it's why it's so important to make sure that we work as a kind of collaborative community to fact check ourselves before we do things like go to print or go to media or flippantly reshare something that really got our goat. So just make sure you utilize this network and share it with your friends, because when we are posting, I can guarantee you we have really researched and heard it from the horse's mouth. And it's just been so lovely having our expert panel here to help us today. So thank you for that. And then still those naughty little questions, John.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is the thing that I discovered most is how cheap, how inexpensively you can pick up a used electric vehicle and they've done shed loads of miles. So we dispel a couple of myths. They're not expensive. You can pick up used vehicles really inexpensively. Secondly, the mileage that people cover is quite astronomical. It's as much, if not more, than you do in a standard petrol or diesel vehicle. There is no reason why you can't do this if you just apply yourself to it. That was the big learning for me. Couple of questions.
Sorry, John, just before we go to questions, we're going to live from the studio. Sarah Simon.
Oh, here we go.
This is the only reason Sam came on.
Way!
Oh gosh, that was a quick change. Oh, it's very hot in here. EV Cafe News, 21st of July. As if my nerves weren't shot enough from the masterminding session, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the EV Cafe News with me, Sarah Sloman. It's lunchtime, pay attention. First, we had the news about Nissan Motor Corporation's £1 billion investment in an electric vehicle hub in Sunderland, which will include a gigafactory for car batteries. According to tech publication Silicon, Japanese car maker Nissan has delivered some welcome news for post-Brexit Britain with a new gigafactory, which will make electric vehicle batteries. The Japanese car maker said that the factory will be built in partnership with Chinese battery manufacturer Envision. The car maker said that production in Sunderland will create 909 new jobs at the plant, which is painfully specific, and more than 4,500 jobs in the UK supply chain, while safeguarding a further 75 R&D jobs. Meanwhile, more news when Stellantis, the world's fifth largest car maker, is expected to invest hundreds of millions of pounds in adapting its Ellesmere Port plant to build electric vans. Motor giant Stellantis has said to have guaranteed the future of its Ellesmere Port manufacturing site this month, with confirmation that it will make new electric vans, including passenger versions, from 2022. The announcement will secure around 1,100 jobs at the Cheshire plant, as well as thousands more in the motor industry supply chain. Stellantis said it will manufacture a range of 8 electric vans, from delivery vehicles to their passenger derivatives, from the end of next year as part of a £1 million investment. The government has reportedly contributed £30 million, which should just about cover my news anchor fee. And now the brilliant British Volt has been granted planning approval for an electric car battery gigaplant in the northeast of England. Plans for a battery gigafactory to supply electric vehicle manufacturers has taken a step forward after the scheme was granted planning approval. Northumberland County Council has approved plans by British Volt to set up the massive factory on the former coal yards of the old Blythe Power Station site. So the question remains, Mr. Kirby, Mr. Paul Kirby, EV Essentials, the electric van man, the very one. Does this go far enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Superb, Sarah.
Done.
Damn, she good.
I'm sure we teed up a much better response than yes. But
did I dazzle with my sequins, which is still halfway down my waist?
Yes, I mean, anyway, moving along.
You're the van market. You understand the van market better than anybody else. And if I hear one more time people saying that they're not going to go EV until there's a 7-seater produced, I feel like perhaps this passenger derivative of the van chassis could be the answer for lots of people looking for their next adventure vehicle or fitting their family life into the EV realm.
Absolutely, Sarah. I would agree with that completely. There are some cracking 7-seaters out there already, and more. Yes, Scott has just said an ENV 200 Avalia. That is a definitely available vehicle currently, but they're not going to be producing for much longer. Of course, you've got the Mercedes EQV if you have a small mortgage available to you, and there are other vehicles available, I'm sure, but it is the most disappointing vehicle ever produced because it's not a van, and it should have been, but there we go.
Excellent. We've actually only got 5 minutes or so left of the show. So, John, should we go back to the mailroom and finish off those questions?
Yeah, can I just say that every time that we plan to do this show, Sarah says, shall I do the news? And the four of us go, uh-huh. And she's like, oh, but really? Uh-huh. Most definitely. And I'm sure the chat box will be full of compliments for you, dear. That was marvellous. Right.
Oh, I am glad. I aim to bring the knowledge in the same silly way every time.
You're wonderful. Robin Hughes has asked an interesting question, and we can kind of answer that from our own first-hand knowledge of the ITT Hub. Is converting a second-hand ICE vehicle to 100% EV feasible in terms of cost and engineering integrity? And is it worth even taking a new ICE without the powertrain and converting it to 100% EV? Where do we start with that? Who wants to have a crack at that one? Oh, Paul, go.
Well, I would say there are certain instances where it is definitely a good idea. And we exemplified one at the ITT Hub in the Bug. Yeah, so a 1960s, early 70s Bug, took the engine out of that, put an electric vehicle drivetrain in it, and it brought it back to life. So I think where certainly that kind of thing is happening, that's not a bad shout. I'm seeing upgrades to older electric vehicles, putting newer batteries in them, which I think is also a good idea. I'm not sure that taking, when we think of all the, particularly the electric vans where it is happening, so vehicles are being built on the line at the moment, they're getting to the end of the line without an engine and we're sticking a battery in them. I'm not sure they're always the best solution. It seems to be a halfway house and doesn't really answer the industry questions and isn't a solution to the problems. Therefore, I would always tend to go for ground up built would be best. But you know, if not, then just the vehicle but built on the line and done from scratch would be my view.
Can we ask Ewan, because having seen some of the plug life stuff, I know that the calculations to celebrate EV actually include the chassis. But if you're reusing the chassis, surely these numbers only get better.
Absolutely, yeah. You've just chopped about 10 tons of CO2 off of the embodied carbon of a typical vehicle by retrofitting it to electric. It definitely makes sense, particularly with classic cars or very specific vehicles that are worth the investment. Like, for example, Land Rover Defenders. There's actually not really many feasible alternatives to the Land Rover Defender on the market at the moment, including the old school, the new Defender versus the old. A lot of people prefer the old as a rugged workhorse. Look at what electric classic cars have done. Their top spec Defender retrofit is admittedly very pricey, but it gives 100 kilowatts of rapid charging capability. It gives 22 kilowatt onboard charging, 100 kilowatt hours battery capacity, and better off-roading capability than the original ICE. So there are already niche examples where this makes sense. In terms of mainstream, taking like a Ford Focus and retrofitting that to electric, the biggest bottleneck is going to be the widespread availability of parts at an affordable rate, because at the moment all the major automotive manufacturers are buying these up en masse at the cheap rates, to the extent that a used battery pack or the modules from that battery pack cost twice what they did to the manufacturer when they were new, because that many people want their hands on them for these sort of projects. Once we get a ready, steady supply for vehicle retrofitters to be able to do these things, we'll start to see this becoming an economically feasible option for the average family car, let alone your cherished classic car or your rugged farm workhorse.
I think Ewan makes a great point. We chatting to Matt Cleveley at and I've forgotten the name of his business.
Cleveley Commercials.
Yes, of course it is. Of course. Sorry, Matt. I mean, you might see this on a video, but I do know what you do.
I'm definitely going to share it with him now.
But he definitely has a real challenge to get parts and materials to upgrade the vehicles that he's dealing with. So you're absolutely right. It's the bottleneck or the demand from the main manufacturers, and obviously they've got the money and the power and the sway. Then they're sucking it up, and the little guys that want to do these sorts of projects, not going to get it.
Yeah, actually, speaking of Cleveley EV, I believe going back to that Nissan Leaf that's available on Auto Trader for $3,500, if anyone fancies being shrewd with their investment, they could buy that and then either retrofit the battery pack to the higher capacity 40 kilowatt hour one, or buy a Muxan range extending battery that goes in the boot. It doesn't take up that much space. And that could actually give you a longish range electric vehicle for potentially under 10 grand. Oh no, actually including the purchase price, just over 10 grand, but still a good half of the price of a modern longish range electric car. So that's quite a financially savvy way to get behind the wheel of a decent range electric vehicle. Side topic, but Cleveley do those retrofits, which is why I thought I'd mention.
Right, that's all we have time for today. So do we want to give the announce the winner of the mug, John?
Yes. Whose was the most challenging question? Who will receive a mug? Who tripped us up the most?
Well, I actually think, let me just check my facts, because I think that actually it should be
me. Oh,
Already got a mug.
Paul Barnfather.
Yes,
Well
yes,
done,
yes,
Paul.
yes.
Well done, Paul.
You're the winner.
Paul's
Definitely.
question was around kilowatt hour, and it stumped all of us twice. The only one who was able to get it was the brain on legs, Dr. Ewan McTurk. So I think Paul's question easily the winner.
It was a googly.
So at least my namesake won something.
Just before you go, if you can take a look at this poll on what other elements of the EV Cafe would you like to see in the future. Until next time, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our LinkedIn page, register for future events, and if you'd like to support us, then please visit our Patreon page, which you'll find the link on our LinkedIn page. And I think that's it.
Yeah, I think it's a typo in there, Johnny. You put less nonsense as one of the options. I think you meant more nonsense, didn't you?
Well, we'll see you at the same time next time in August.
Good stuff. Can I go back to the beach now?
Yes, you can.
I can take
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
Waving.
Kilowatt is a measure of power. Kilowatt.
Yeah, whatever.
Shush!
I was right.
Yeah, but you still didn't get the points.
Points mean prizes.
Yeah.
What do you would get?
Oh no, nothing. Shh.
Something. Sorry.
Didn't he win?
Yeah, there was a late kind of snatch for victory there, the 4-pointer at the end, with supporting video as well.
That was bonus.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Hey, bye-bye, everybody.
See ya.
Take care, Johnny.
Take
Look
it
forward
easy.
to hearing about the job.
Oh
Hope
yeah.
it's going well.
Thanks, Neil.
Right. Catch you later on.
See ya.